I'm alive. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. It is a Wednesday night. We are a couple of days away from the Springboks versus Scotland game in Edinburgh this weekend. And I suppose a couple of almost sort of nerves and stuff like that. It's quite interesting to sort of see the conversation that are continuing about the Springbok team. And on the back of a couple of sort of conversations we had a bit last weekend, I thought that tonight is supposed to be a panel, so we're going to be joined by Carl Usher a little bit later. But basically, the whole point of today's discussion really is this concept of building depth and whether the Springboks are or aren't building depth. And I think that it's been quite interesting to sort of see the reactions from yesterday. Now, obviously, yesterday when the team gets announced, you have sort of immediate reactions. A lot of people aren't happy or are happy or whatever. Then they've got a lot of sort of things to say and sort of issues with the side itself. And today we're probably a little bit more settled. You've had time to sort of look at the team. You've had time to sort of assess things and calm down a little bit, and then sort of look at it a little bit more sort of analytically. And that's kind of the plan for hopefully the next hour. We do have load shedding scheduled for about 25 minutes. We have made a plan to try and see if we can continue going through that. But if it doesn't work, well, unfortunately, it doesn't work, doesn't it? But we'll have to wait and see. The plan is to try and go for over half an hour. But if whatever happens, then what can we do? What can we do? Unfortunately, that's just the country we live in. But yeah, let me know in the comments below. I'm going to put a poll in the chat as well. And the question I'm going to be asking is: Are you happy with the Springboks depth? And the question sort of goes along, this whole idea of building to the next World Cup. The fact that we are always building, and that you're always sort of building to your next big thing, and the next big thing for us is always the World Cup. The World Cup is always your sort of your major competition, your sort of pie in the sky thing. Every single time you start looking at the side and you build the side, you're always looking towards the World Cup as the big event. Especially after having gotten the British and Irish Lions series sorted, because the next time we have a British and Irish Lions series is 2033. So it all comes down now to building towards the next World Cup. And that's what I want to talk about. Are we happy with how we're building towards 2023 World Cup? Do you think enough young players are getting opportunity? Do you think our squad is too old? Is it an aging squad? Do we need to maybe stress about where our squad will be in a couple of years' time and whether it'll be good enough or not? That's kind of sort of we want to try and sort of the crux we want to talk about tonight. And I was just literally looking at the player profiles now, looking at the age and stuff like that. Not necessarily the ages, but the sort of the age that they'll be at the next World Cup. And I think it's going to be quite interesting in terms of what sort of the conversation we're going to have. Because I personally am not worried, because I think that the issue and the reason we haven't had more young players come through is because we didn't have rugby last year. Now, we're in a very awkward situation where obviously you couldn't build depth during the British and Irish Lions series. You're not going to throw a bunch of youngsters together and let them play rugby. You're not going to probably blood youngsters, in a 4-match overseas-based sort of rugby championship against Australia and New Zealand, which we didn't. Maybe we could have done during the sort of Australian game. And generally, traditionally, we've never really blooded youngsters or new players in outgoing tours. Just historically, that's just never been the case. We've always the series where you blood the most youngsters and bring in the most new faces has always traditionally been the incoming tour, which we didn't have this year. I mean, we will have next year. So as far as I'm concerned, I think next year will probably be a year, but even then it's a bit awkward, in terms of being able to bring players in next year. Incoming tour could be a nice opportunity to do it, but at the same time, then you're already sort of sitting there thinking, right, World Cup preparations, where are we? And I think the biggest issue was last year was a very important year in terms of being able to bring a couple of players from the fringe and give them opportunities. But what we've also got to look at is the greater squad. So obviously we've got the 23 that will take the field this weekend, but who else is in the squad? The players that aren't playing. Do we have 33, 34, 35-year-old passengers who, are part of the squad and not playing? Or are the people who are part of the squad and not playing, are they youngsters? Are they the next generation? Are we already seeing the next generation within the squad? And I think we are. I think the omission of the likes of Roscoe Speckman, Morné Steyn stepping back. I think that there are some very good, sort of nicely sort of aged players within the squad. Salman Murat coming into the squad, having something like Fassi in the squad, having a Grant Williams in the squad. Joseph David, for example, these are players who've got a good 6, 7, 8 years left of international rugby in them. But let's see who's in the chat. So good evening, Grant. I hope you're well. Albert from Lincoln says, load shedding darkness made a bit brighter by my rugby friends. Well, there we go. At least we've got something to try and cheer us up on this Wednesday evening. Rainer Opman says, the only position we don't have depth in is at fly half. Slow says, Fassi, please, I've been waiting for so long. Grant says, I'm happy. It's unfortunate that a lot of our young talent is injured at the moment. COVID also wrote us of 1 year of preparation. Albert says, if you consider how Racing succeeded in transformation without weakening the team, was a success. And also we have a big names like Pierce Toy out and still winning. So no problem. Double says the area I think we like depth is 12 and 13. JC is I'm back up at playing at wing. What's the point? Well, I think it's Jesse Creel playing at wing. I think it's something that they've wanted to try. And I suppose if you're looking at building a side, I think it's quite important to sort of see who are your utility backs in inverted commas. If Francois Steyn does not make the next World Cup, who can you put in the side so that you've got a bit more of a versatile bench? I think that if Jesse Creel can cover wing and can cover centre, we know he can cover centre. That's where he's played a lot of the Springbok rugby, and he's having 50 tests this weekend. So we know that there's that Jesse Creel's quality. We know what he brings. I think it's just a bit of a stopgap. I don't think the plan was when they departed the Shores. I don't think the plan was probably to have Jesse Creel out on the wing. I think Spoon Coursy's visa issues, along with his and Colby's injury and stuff like that, they then said, right, well, we can turn back to a little bit of experiment that we haven't had much chance to sort of really talk about. But we're going to talk a little bit about that because obviously I'm going to be bringing in an England fan, so that'll help. England have got a very different way of things in terms of the squad they've announced. But at the same time, you've got to think about this as England, this being an incoming tour for England, especially having a game like a Tonga, which is a nice game to have to be able to blood some players. Whereas for the Springboks, it's very much an outgoing tour. So for Springboks, it's as if England, if you were to sort of reverse the roles, it's England coming down here and playing 3 matches. Would they be picking the same squad to go out to New Zealand for 3 matches? No, they probably wouldn't. And I think that's an important thing we need to consider. But let me sort out my headphones and bring in the man with the most hair on Forever Sports. Although I reckon, give me the rest of the month, and I reckon we could be matching people here. Let me make sure my headphones are working, which I think they are. Yeah, it's a very strange little tone to have there. But let's bring in Carl, shall we? There we go, and there we go. Good evening, lad.
How are things?
Look, I mean, what can I say? You're sitting overseas. You've got internet. You've probably got power. We're sort of watching our clocks. I think there's like a 96-hour water shortage for parts of Johannesburg next weekend. I don't have internet for most of the day. But you know what? The weather, it's pretty balmy down here. So we'll take what we can get. We'll take what we can get. There's got to be some sort of benefits of being down here. And if it's the fact that, I mean, what's the temperature over there right now for you?
It's not particularly warm now, but I mean, it's dark. It was actually quite a nice day today in Scotland. So, well, where I am.
Define nice.
Not raining.
You see. This is where we're sort of trading off. People keep saying, "Why haven't you gone overseas?" I'm like, "Because I like the sun." But
I mean, to be fair, like with global warming and everything, we had like a 3-day 26 degrees summer when I first got here, so that was nice.
I mean, we throw out the record books. We're into a whole new system over there. But speaking of weather for this weekend, very nice weather predicted for the Boks game, which is going to be quite cool. It's supposed to be it's a bit of rain on Friday, but Saturday itself is supposed to be quite dry. Supposed to be quite cool, not too windy. But yeah, we've had a weekend. Well, I suppose we've had 2 weekends of Autumn Nation series, but the official first weekend really of the last weekend, and I think a couple of interesting games. Obviously, as an England fan, you guys haven't really sort of have had that big test just yet, but a couple of nice form. I mean, Marcus Smith looked pretty good over the weekend, as he often does. But it's interesting to be able to bring in an England fan because I think obviously you guys compared to the Springbok squad, very different thought process going into each squad. Eddie Jones definitely having a bit of license to say, you know what, I know what certain players bring. I don't even have to bother bringing them in. Let's see what these guys can do. And at the same time, almost sort of saying to some of these players, listen, chap, if you're not going to perform, you don't have a guaranteed spot in the squad. So we'll start with a little bit of the England stuff. I mean, what's been your sort of thinking about the whole England situation? Have you enjoyed the way that Eddie Jones has gone about it, or are you a bit hesitant about the idea?
I'm certainly happy with what's happening at the moment. I think it's, to be honest, it's been coming for a while, and I have a feeling that it's come because of pressure from the RFU and England Rugby Union, rather than Eddie just saying, right, screw these players that I've been playing for 4 years now, because we know how hesitant he is to change people he likes. So it is good to see, but I don't think it was entirely his decision. I think he was probably coerced into it, which needed to happen. And it like you said, we haven't really been tested yet. I mean, I as much as I can't wait for Tonga to hit their straps with the new eligibility rules. It's going to be a while, but it will be good for the sport, especially with how many effectively how many players New Zealand poach. It'll be good to see them be able to go back.
Well, Eddie Jones had that classic comment where they said they're talking about New Zealand depth, and he said, "You guys got the best 3 academies in the world in Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa." So,
I mean,
on
paper, if Tonga had kept every player they've ever produced, they have the best team in the world outright. Like they would never be.
It is a bit childish. I mean, Sebu Reece doing what he does for Fiji is a bit different to doing what he does for New Zealand there.
Yeah. Which, I mean, he was he was very keen to go and play it back to Suva. I think they played in earlier in the year. He was keen to play against Fiji, which I can understand, but also is a bit like, really, you kind of want to give your country of birth an absolute killing.
Literally, yeah.
But no, I mean, I think that will be good for the sport in general.
Well, speaking of giving your own country an absolute killing, it's going to be quite a select. We'll wait. I don't think that. Unless I missed something, I don't think the Scottish side has been announced. But it will have a bit of a South African flavour in this weekend. It's pretty much a given. At least in the likes of a Johan van der Merwe, maybe a Stuman, could see a Dylan Richardson, could see a Carl Steyn, could see. I think that's most of it. Obviously, Ollie Cable's in and around there, or VP Naldo. They're part of. Actually, I haven't checked too much of what's. But
Duhan.
On that note, so a lot of very upset South Africans down here about the squad. Well, not the squad necessarily, but maybe the team that's been selected for this weekend. And a lot of people saying that they're worried about the depth and that we're missing a trick and that we need to be giving more young players a chance. Although I do think the sentence "build depth, give more young players a chance" is basically just reading "we want to see Fassi." I haven't seen too many players or too many fans standing up going, "Where's Joseph Dweba? Why aren't we seeing Grant Williams? I want to see, Salman Murat." It's pretty much sort of all hinges around one player. So I think that it's been a bit of a disparage between whether people genuinely want to see all the youngsters or whether it's just a case of there's one player who's people feel has been knocking the door down that isn't getting a chance. But I mean, do you think they've got a certain point in terms of Springbok depth? Do you think that they aren't building depth as well as they could, or do you think that it's kind of inevitable given the year they've had now coming to quite difficult outgoing tour that it was always going to be a very similar squad and they weren't exactly going to throw caution to the wind and suddenly start playing a bunch of 20s?
Well, I mean, I think it's clear to see that they are lacking in certain positions, and a couple of injuries really throws them into a bit of a tailspin because, I mean, I certainly wouldn't pick Creel at wing. I don't dislike him. I think he's a good player when he's playing well, but that wouldn't be my first choice. And I don't see what any of the team gains from that. I don't see what he particularly gains from that because that's not going to be a position he will ever be picked in with a full strength side. So what's the point in having him there? I mean, he's not the greatest defensively. I think we all will remember the final try in the Japan South Africa World Cup game.
Look, that was a long time ago, to be fair.
but the point, I mean, you can't say, oh well, we're worried about Fassi's defense if you then say, well, then you pick Creel, who's he's probably about the same level. who will never actually play in that position.
I'd back Creel's defense ahead of Fassi, to be honest. I think I would. I personally would trust. Put it this way: Duhan van der Merwe is running down the wing. I can kind of understand them going. I'd probably back Jesse Creel to stop him probably more than Fassi right now.
No, I mean, I did have a thought that might be the case for this weekend. I did have a feeling that they wouldn't pick Fassi because of Duhan, but like, to be honest, I don't see him actually having much of an impact in this game because he plays well when he's against opposition that allows Scotland to play freely. I don't see South Africa letting them do that. So I honestly don't think he'll have much of an impact in the game. And we've shown that they showed on the Lions tour that under pressure he's not actually very good.
Yeah, well, Finn Russell was throwing a little bit of spice onto things, saying, "Yeah, I reckon I might kick quite a bit this weekend." You know, it's just sort of just trying to stir the pot, trying to sort of get people guessing on what's going to do. But look, I think the funny thing is, I think even if you didn't see Jesse Creel on the wing, I don't think we'd be seeing Upload Fassi. I think when they departed, I reckon the plan was, listen, Spoon Course, you're going to play all 3 tests in that 14, and at a push, maybe if we were to change something, we might drop Mapimpi for Fassi. I think right now, I think the Boks only see Fassi right now as an 11. I don't think it just doesn't seem like they play him at 14, and I don't think that they want to throw him into the deep end at fullback either, just by virtue of the fact that when Damien Willems said, now they've gone straight back to Villaroo.
I don't understand the logic of that. You know, I kind of understand the whole don't throw them in the deep end, but that it's not. You've been playing against the players that you're going to go up against he hasn't, because they won't flip and let him go back to the Sharks, yet they won't play him. But I mean, you've played against all these players before. You're really not being thrown in the deep end. Don't forget, he's played Super Rugby. Like, he's played against all the big Kiwis. Like, this is, yes, it's international level. It's slightly hard, but he's been in the camp for ages. Like, he should be trusted enough to just, you can do this, go and do it. If he doesn't, okay, new plan, but give him the chance.
And I personally would have given Mapimpi a rest and said have we go at 11. I don't see where that's where he's played so far. He scored 2 tries. He looked very comfortable there. If they are worried about having being at fullback and if there is a worry, then I don't see why. And it's not necessarily. I mean, it's not dropping Mapimpi. He's got a stupidly good try scoring record. But if you want to see what Fassi can do, then I think that would be quite an easy thing. I don't think anyone's going to have a flipping issue with dropping Mapimpi for a Scotland test, saying, right, Fassi, have you going on the left wing? Let's see what you can do. But he does seem to. It is the kind of the trigger word at the moment. A lot of people talking about it.
I have a totally different mentality to these tests, and I think I have a feeling there's a bit of a, we want to get back to number 1 and we want to keep number 1, whereas that really shouldn't be much of an issue right now.
Do you know what the problem is? The problem is Springbok fans, because Springbok fans will sit here right now.
I know they're bad.
And they'll say, we want to see you play the youngsters. Our squad's old. We want to see you play the youngsters. And they're like, okay, cool. And then you lose. And everyone's like, hey, but why are you guys losing now? No, you must guys all get sacked because you can't lose a test match. So I do think that I think that being a Springbok coach, one of the hardest things in the world, because it's a public that demands certain players have to play, and yet if you lose, then what the hell are you doing? Because how dare you lose because you want to give other players a chance? So it's always such a catch-22, and I think that the biggest problem is I think we are looking at this tour as fans, thinking this is the time. Let's try and get a couple of new faces in. Whereas I think the Springbok managers are thinking, chaps, this is our first outgoing tour in terms of, I mean, obviously Rassie and Jacques and Mngomezulu have been there before, but it's Deon David's first outgoing tour, it's Don Human's first outgoing tour. I think it's Felix Jones' first outgoing tour as well, actually. And I reckon they're sitting there thinking, you know what, let's go out and actually try and win all 3 tests, try and make a bit of a statement. I think they're quite scared of losing because of the backlash. People were calling for Jacques Nienaber's head off that second Australian test. And he 3 tests ago, he'd won the British and Irish Lion test, and now he's being sacked. So it's, I think we are the issue. Springbok fans are the issue here.
Dude, I went to Hilton College and I lived in the Rat and Parrot. I know how bad Springbok fans can be. And that's actually, to be fair, I mean, you know, I lived in South Africa for longer than I lived in the UK, and so you'd think that I would kind of South Africa would be my second team, but I don't support them like that because I just can't stand the fans. I find them actually very difficult to get on with because
Yeah, look, unfortunately, it's usually about 95% passion, 5% sense, which can be a good and a bad thing. Look, as I said, there's one thing you can't fault Springbok fans, and people watching this is not having a go at you guys because we're all the same.
yeah,
But yeah, I think unfortunately, passion often comes sort of before a bit of common sense. I mean, a lot of people sort of react quite quickly before then saying, right, actually, I mean, let me actually think about this a bit.
I've got to admit, Esterhazen at centre is actually a good call. He's just ridiculously good for the Quins right now, and it might be a good call against England because he has first-hand experience of how Marcus Smith plays.
Yeah, well, I think it's that those. I think that there are a couple of names people are sort of are wanting, you know, and Estes is one that comes up a lot. People are obviously quite worried about Tyron Green. Not so much that he's not playing, but if he doesn't play, does he then go? You know what? I reckon the White of England could look quite good on me, and sort of go that direction, which I don't think he wants to do. I think when he left, he said that he had actually spoken to Rasmus Erasmus himself, and he basically had the assurances that him leaving would not, you know, just exclude him from being a part of a Springbok. I think he wants to be a Springbok, but there's a lot of people panicking a little bit because obviously he's had a very good, you know, sort of 7-8 months. But it's interesting. It's always such a catch-22. You know, I personally wouldn't mind losing a game or two if we were to build depth, but as we saw with the Australian game, if you lose a test match as a Springbok coach, people want you out quite quickly. But what I was comparing to that Fassi story last night, I think it's been quite similar for me to the Damien McKenzie story, where you had him just knocking down doors for a couple of years, and he was always in the squad. He was often in the squad, but it only took, I think there was that 2017 Test series after the British and Irish Lions, where I think Dag was injured, Ben Smith was injured. They had like 3 injuries, and they basically had to start him, and then he obviously started performing like he did. But he was another one. I think it was a bit similar to Fassi in terms of just being so good at Super Rugby, like highest point scorer, but hadn't quite managed to sort of get that chance because, look, at the time, I mean, the names unlisted, you had a Ben Smith, you had an Israel Dag, Geordie Barrett was coming through, you still had Bowden Barrett operating around there, you had some phenomenal players. So it's always tough to get in there.
I think what it's kind of the same thing as Sam Simmonds, and you know, him being dropped again from the England squad. It irritates me, but I kind of get it because you know, you've got Don Brandt who's pretty similar to Sam Simmonds. Yes, he doesn't have the try scoring record that Sam Simmonds does, but he can play in more positions, whereas Sam Simmonds is an out and out 8, and that's apart from Billy, you know, Eddie doesn't really like choosing players like that, which is really frustrating because he's now not choosing Billy, so it's a perfect opportunity.
I was about to say.
But at this point, I don't try and predict anything from Eddie Jones anymore because like his patterns don't make sense. So like I don't know. Sam Simmonds is an interesting case, and he certainly needs to at least get more of an opportunity for England, considering how good he is. But it's going to be difficult to fit him in because he only plays 8.
Yeah, look, I mean, he'd be considered too small to play for South Africa, so it's a good thing he's not South African.
Which, yeah, and that was actually another reason that just I hated South African rugby purely for that. It just irritates me so much.
Look, there are still plenty of people out there who sit there. We still to this day, when the team gets announced yesterday, we'll sit there saying, "What's Kwaka Smith doing there? He's too small." And you just sit there thinking, "Have you not watched the past 240 minutes of Springbok rugby and been able to appreciate it?" So I think it's, there's quite a strong contingent of people who are just very, very obviously pretty sizist, but
it's just it's so stupid because like one of your best flanks, although he didn't have a massive amount of time playing for the Boks, but one of your best flanks was not a big guy. Heinrich Brousseau was not that big, but Christ, he was good.
I mean, he had that 2-year period where he was untouchable. I mean, they literally changed the law to basically nullify him. It was just like, this oak's just too good. We're going to have to actually adjust a few things because he just can't be doing what he's doing week in, week out because it's just not fair.
Yeah.
But
as much as it's like as much as I love Francois Steyn on the bench because I'm a massive Francois Steyn fan, and I think South Africa is a rugby playing nation have kind of been robbed from watching him play as much as he should have. I don't know why he's there anymore, and I hate saying that, but it doesn't make sense to keep him there.
Well, you see, I've been called quite a lot of names because when the squad was announced, I said that I personally would have almost liked to have seen Warwick ahead of him, and as you're saying now, it's got absolutely nothing to do with Francois Steyn as a player. We know he's one of the. Somebody messaged me yesterday, and he said, unpopular opinion, Francois Steyn is the greatest Springbok ever, and I said
he's not far off.
I said I think the sentence should read, Francois Steyn should have been the greatest Springbok ever.
Yeah.
In terms of out and out talent, the fact that he's got the longest Springbok career ever in terms of years, and yet has 72 caps, compared to Victor Matfield.
He probably could have played 120 odd, maybe 130.
I mean, he's been playing the same amount of years. His international as Adam Wynne-Jones, and yet he's got less than half the amount of test caps. And the biggest, and what I keep saying when it comes to Francois Steyn is you've got to make. It's the same as Dwayne Vermeulen. You've got to make a decision.
Yeah.
If he's playing 23 at the moment, does that mean he is your 23 at the next World Cup? Because if the answer is no, which just for now, then there's no point.
Yeah, exactly.
So my only thing is that they think that he can genuinely get to the next World Cup, which personally I'm a little bit skeptical about.
I'd love it, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he can, maybe he can't. This weekend, I think was the game where I saw the most signs to say that he could still play in a year or two's time. Because this weekend, I mean, there's a couple of games at inside center. A couple of times he just looked a little bit slow, a little bit heavy, not quite with the pace. This weekend, look, he still looks very heavy. I mean, he's bouncing with quite a few people in the tackle, much more physical than he was back in the day.
He's not quick.
But he doesn't have the pace anymore, and the question is, can he still be there in 2 years' time? Look, the fifth 22 is definitely added to that conversation. If that's going to be part of the World Cup in 2 years' time, and you can have someone who can put you in an attacking 5 meter line out from your own half. It's a useful skill to have.
I don't know. I think it's a bit. It's almost the exact opposite of what what's his name? Jake White did. When he was preparing for the 2007 World Cup, he was just like, right, get ready. We might lose a whole bunch of games, but we're going to win the World Cup. And it's almost like they're now just like, no, we're going on completely the opposite of that. But it could have very bad, ramifications at the World Cup. Although it never seems to, because you always bloody win it. But
look, I mean, we try. It's not our fault. We just, it's just our competition. Us in New Zealand, it just comes easy to us. But it is interesting because I was looking at all the ages, because I was sitting there saying, do people have a point about people saying that we're not preparing for the next World Cup? And I sat there thinking, well, define preparing for the next World Cup. So, how many tests do we have until the World Cup? We've probably got 12, maybe 13 tests next year. We'll probably have 3 or 4 mid-year. We've got our 6 rugby championship and then our 3 end of year. So call it 12 or 13 tests next year, and then we're into World Cup year. And World Cup year is usually an incoming series, a shortened rugby championship, and then you're playing the World Cup. So you're sitting there thinking, when and who do we need to phase out? Who are we worried about in terms of having an aging squad? Who are we worried about? Because if we do have a squad, because people are sitting there saying everyone's going to retire at the same time, and I think there's a certain amount of merit to that, because I think you look at the squad and there are a lot of 29, 30, 31-year-olds there. Like a Dwayne Vermeulen, 37. We know that the World Cup, if he makes it, will be a swan song. Francois Steyn will not play another one. Franco Most, these sort of players were 30, 31, that's suddenly 33 at the next World Cup, and they're into that grey area. So it could very well be a case of having to almost start from scratch after the World Cup. But the question then remains, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because this time we don't have a British and Irish Lions series. So you could have 3 years of Test match rugby to basically build a new side if you want to do it. And we've seen with England, Eddie Jones did it. He didn't get them past the final hurdle, But England were not exactly after that 2015 World Cup, quite a disappointing campaign, really. And then 4 years later, suddenly they're World Cup finalists.
I think, as much as it's easy to jump on and say, look how far Eddie Jones took them. At the same time, I to be honest, I didn't actually mind Stuart Lancaster as coach. I thought, he brought
I thought he got a rough deal.
He brought in the bunch of players that mostly are still playing, and Eddie Jones inherited an incredible side that just had a really unfortunate World Cup. And the game against Australia, yeah, we were screwed, but we kind of had to win it. The game against Wales should have gone for a penalty for the draw, but I don't blame Rob Shaw for going to the corner. I don't blame him for going for the try. Back yourself to win it. I mean, Eddie Jones, he's good, but he's not a World Cup winning coach. He never has. He's won as an assistant coach. He's never won as a coach. And I think the issue now is that of his favorite players, he's picking the wrong ones. And I like Farrell. I think he's a good captain. And every kind of report that you hear from being in a training camp with Farrell has said he's the most incredible captain, and and that he keeps you so motivated to do your best. But at the same time, I honestly think keeping George Ford around instead of Farrell would have been a better pick, because
a lot of people are quite upset about that selection. Yeah,
and George Ford he's still doing well. Farrell has found his form for Saracens again. It's not hard considering Saracens is an incredible outfit. So I mean, it's a bit difficult to judge it based on that. But I don't know. Like, Farrell's been through. He's got the experience of being well ahead in a game and ending up almost losing it or drawing, like that Scotland match. He's got experience of World Cup heartbreak in a final. He's got experience of pool stage exits. But how much of that experience is experience, which is good, and experience, which is scarring? And it holds you back because you're worried about repeating it. So I don't know where I stand with Farrell. I know how good he is, and his goal kicking is unbelievably good. But Marcus Smith can do that. Marcus Smith is a great goal kicker, and he offers so much more in terms of attack. And I'm sick of England playing defensive games. It's boring.
Oh, careful. You must trigger a lot of South African fans, because best believe it's also the common one down here.
You can do that well. We can't. We can't.
That's a good point, actually. At least, and that's the one thing I said. It's a funny thing, because when you do play the kicking game and you do play this defensive orientated game, every single time you win, people will sit there saying, "Oh, okay, but fine, we won." But as soon as you lose, then this is why we lost. So if you win the World Cup using a kicking game, it's because whatever reason. But if it's definitely not because of the kicking game. That's not why you won the World Cup. You lose a match. Yeah, it's that damn kicking game. That's the reason that you lost the match. So it's always an amusing reaction. But before we get too far,
Danny Cipriani didn't play. My honest opinion about Danny Cipriani is he was actually Marcus Smith level talent. He didn't play much for England because he got put in to a side way too early, and the side was getting thrashed 36-0 every single game by New Zealand and South Africa. And he also had a lot of personal problems. I know he got arrested a few times on nights out and things like that, which didn't help. But yeah,
French.
Yeah,
he should have been French or Scottish. I reckon he would have been.
He would have fit into a French team.
He is in the mold of a Finn Russell. Those just the playmaker. No, he was outrageously talented. But yeah, unfortunately, as you said, a lot of off-field issues and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think he's one of those people. If you had the right coach who can manage him properly, I think there was always a world-class player nestled inside.
What do you reckon?
We're going to be able to sort of dissect.
What do you reckon about Grant's question? Do you reckon Farrell would have played so much for England if he wasn't playing for Saracens? Interesting question.
It's very interesting. I mean, the whole Saracens thing was quite interesting in the Six Nations, where a lot of people weren't happy with the fact that Saracens players were busy being picked out of the flipping second division, and the whole idea that
I didn't
people
have
were
so much
picking
of an
on.
issue with that. It's just that they hadn't played for like a year. So like,
Yeah, well, yeah. Look, I think that I don't think people were saying that Mario Itoje isn't good enough to play for England, but people were sitting there saying, "How can you pick players who haven't played rugby at a reasonable level for like 4 or 5 months?" When you had other players who were playing week in week out Premiership and playing very very well. But we'll still dissect the England's Springbok matchup a bit more in a week's time, when we can really sort of gear ourselves off towards Twickenham. But a bit sort of closer to this weekend. Some flipping good games this weekend. Obviously, we're starting
yeah,
it off with South Africa versus Scotland. England have got Australia, if I'm not
yeah,
incorrect, and
New
then
Zealand, Ireland.
France, New Zealand, Ireland. Obviously, that's the one in between there. So it's a stacked Saturday rugby,
Mm.
and we'll start with the South African game. What was your first impressions? Obviously, take away the Fassi issue, but a couple of very interesting selections, notably the halfback pairing for South Africa. What was your sort of initial, and even to be fair, Villaroo coming in at 15, it's a very different team having Villaroo starting 15 than if people had gotten their wish and had a Francois Steyn starting 15 in terms of the type of players. So what was your initial reaction when you saw that South African squad?
To be honest, I only glanced at it. But I kind of I think they're preparing for the fact that they're playing against Finn Russell, and they're basing it off the last Lions test, because Finn Russell was put in, did amazingly, and then straight up said, "Well, Gatlin was a dick for not letting us play an attacking style of rugby." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I believe you. Trust me, I fucking believe you." And I
And somebody
100%.
else came out and said that they did the wrong
It was
tactics. I don't know who it
Reece
was.
Zammit. Reece Zammit basically said
Yes.
there was no way
Yeah.
I was going to get picked because that's not my game.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating, because if they had played an attacking style of rugby, I reckon they could have won the series. Because with the talent there, South Africa wouldn't have wanted to play that kind of style. They could very easily, but it would have been so much closer.
Yeah, I would have loved to. It's just funny how so many
More
people were
entertaining.
waiting for the Finn Russell chats and like Stuart. I mean Stuart Hogg, for example. I'm a huge Stuart Hogg fan. I think when he's playing well, and he's one of those players who loves a big occasion. When I mean, obviously they're no fans, but I mean this weekend, Stuart Hogg and Finn Russell, they both scare me equally as much, because I think Stuart Hogg, when the crowd starts getting into it, and you score a try early, you talk about like a passion merchant and somebody that feeds off the crowd. He's somebody like that. He just steps up to the occasion. But I think we have very much picked a side, very aware of what we're going to see on this weekend. But I think what a lot of people don't, and we'll talk a little bit about the attacking nature, but I think a lot of people don't give enough respect for, and maybe not enough analysis, is the Scottish defence. And especially how well they defend out wide, and the likes of a Chris Harris, who's defensively brilliant at outside centre in the way that he reads the game.
I like Chris Harris.
I think we're in for a very, very tough 80 minutes. Arguably, probably a tougher 80 minutes than against Wales, except a very different type of sort of challenge ahead.
Let me quickly check the weather for Edinburgh this weekend. Saturday is just going to be cold. It shouldn't be rainy. I don't know. I don't think it will be a high-scoring game. That's for sure. Scotland never win high-scoring games ever. It's just not a thing. They don't like scoring a lot of tries to win a match. I'm not sure. I think South Africa will win, but I don't see it being a pretty game. My problem with Hogg is, and yes, I know he is very talented, but he's such a hit and miss player. He'll either have an incredible game and he'll completely destroy the opposition single-handedly, or he'll do nothing and do something stupid and give away like a yellow or red card, or he'll just completely drop every ball over the try line, and there's just no in between with him.
I'm hoping for the latter, personally.
So that'll be interesting, but I think the players I'm more keen to see for Scotland are people like Darcy Graham. I'm not sure if Stuart McInally is going to start at hooker, but he's really good. And then obviously, you got the South Africans, which will bring in a bit of a bite to the game. I think that'll get tempers firing.
Yeah, I think Duan reckons he's got unfinished business with the Boks. Interested to see what other South Africans we do see this weekend. But I'm interested to sort of see, and it's interesting because Jacques Nienaber speaking last night was saying that because they obviously inevitably asked about the Alton Yankee selection, and they're saying even last weekend, not that we suddenly turned into France or peak All Blacks, but there was definitely more hands on the ball. We definitely kept the ball in hand a little bit more this past weekend. We saw that with a couple of times where we have 12, 13 phases, far more meters run, a couple. I mean, even Pollard all of a sudden is putting a couple of chip kicks in and a grab or two. And Nienaber said that Alton Young has been picked for the certain things that he can bring to the game. Now, we all know that if you're picking Alton Yankees ahead of Pollard in terms of if you want to do a SWOT analysis of them, they're very, very, very dissimilar players. Whatever Pollard's very good at is not what Alton Yankees is very good at. And what Pollard is not great at, Alton Yankees is very good at. So I'm very interested to sort of see, and even Nienaber says within the structure, because obviously Alton Yankees will be expected to kick and play quite a tactical game. But there is, hopefully, and I think that's why they've gone with Herschel as well, who likes to be a bit more instinctive. I think they are hoping that if the game does open up, there is a bit of space of saying, right, Herschel hit a half gap, or Alton hit a nice flat pass to Dave and put him in a gap and stuff like that. Do you see the Boks trying to run into a little bit more with the selections, or what do you reckon?
It's strange because you'd think a player like Kobus Reinach, I mean, who is probably one of the fastest Springboks in the Springbok camp at the moment, and you see what he does at club level. He scores tries from his own 22. You'd think that they would run more, and I think they do with him playing there. I think it's a lot more when Faf is starting that the Boks just kick literally everything, which it works for them. It's boring, but it works. I like Herschel Yankees, and I don't think he's played enough for his talent. I think he after the last World Cup, I thought he would be the starting scrum half going forwards for quite a while. And I like Kobus Reinach, and I think they are a very good pair to have and interchange. I think Elton will, free up players to run a bit more. He always did at the Lions more than kicking, which is actually the one thing I liked about watching the Lions back then. Was
Hey, you couldn't not like watching us play rugby. I mean, at that one season, it was just when you had Warren Whiteley down the wings, you had people throwing.
Yeah.
No, it was child. I mean, I think that semi-final where we ran in 6 tries against the Highlanders or something stupid. It was very good at the time.
Yeah, no, I that was a year where I would actually watch the Lions, not because the Sharks were playing them, but I would just watch the Lions because they would play such good rugby, which was very strange to say because that was not the case for every other year and every year since.
Listen, you're talking to a Lions fan. We're very, very aware of such. We're very aware that we are back in the
doldrums,
gutters, and we'll. Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the Sharks haven't been this year. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but you guys have got a flipping squad. Your squad's actually it's criminal, and now I'm seeing links to fucking Lua Diago. You just need to chill.
That'd be nice. That would be nice. But I'm just keen for Ben Tapuai to actually start, get some game time, and he will be. I think he'll feature in the first game. I think it's Scarlets. I think they're playing.
Yeah, you got the home games. We'll get to you, Aussie. It's in a couple of weeks' time. Let me enjoy not watching the Lions lose every weekend for a while. I've got to take my weekends here, but yeah, I just want to run through a couple of the comments up there because I've been a bit poor them.
Yeah.
But first of all, Kwasi, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really do appreciate that. Grant was saying that Finn Russell was amazing against the Boks for 20 minutes in the third test. Ruan, I think he's created 2 accounts so that he can continue telling us how useless Villaroo is. I'm obviously not his biggest fan.
Can't blame him.
Oliver Lincoln says the best attack can be neutralized by defensive, for example, Boks versus All Blacks. Good point. What is the Boks formation this coming match? It's going to be 8 people in a scrum and 6 people in the back line. Piers Koeman is a fridge, but he can't be a fridge for 80 minutes. Kobus ran a much better out 9 than Herschel. Yeah, I think it is quite a nice headset when it works. Alpha Lincoln says Squid Rugby just released a video analysis of Boks Wales, and there's change in Boks tactics. Well, there we go. I've got my viewing for tomorrow night sorted. Francois says, I didn't like the Lions back then. Did you see the Stormers' record against them? Nothing to like about them. Look, to be fair, I think the Stormers' record was probably better than the Bulls. I think that it took the Bulls at one stage 3 years before they actually beat the Lions at Loftus. It was good times. It was good times. Quinton says, what do you think about Rowan Janssen van Rensburg? I can't say I've watched enough of him in the Premiership, but I always felt that he didn't get a fair chance at the Boks. He got called into the squad off the back of a very good season. He played one game against the Barbarians, scored a try. I thought he played pretty well that game and then never got another opportunity. And I wouldn't be surprised, though, because there does seem to be a reluctancy to go to Andre Esterhuizen. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like a Rowan Janssen van Rensburg or Jan Serfontein could be called up if an injury were to happen to him ahead of an Esterhuizen. But I haven't watched enough Sale Sharks to really comment on what he's doing these days.
I mean, his name is being said everywhere. Like he's talked about a hell of a lot.
He might be the only player who I've seen who's got a bigger chest than Jacques Fourie, which is saying something.
That is saying something.
Dude, it's so large. He's like, the concept of Dorit. It's just stupid though. It's not even like, it's just ridiculous how big he is.
What do you do with it?
I don't know. He runs through people apparently. I mean, each their own.
He is a big guy. He is huge.
Which is why I think he was suited. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, Esterhuizen and Rowan Janssen van Rensburg, they very much fit the mold of if Damon Dalendi were to get injured tomorrow, they very much fit the mold of somebody nice and competitive who's going to run a hard line and, we've got no time for Flaherty number 12. So a lot of people are calling for the Alton Yankees 10, Andre Pollard 12 combo. We might see that this weekend, I suppose, if they wanted to go that route.
Actually, what would be an interesting stat to figure out is, and I heard this during the England game, how many debutants there have been for South Africa since, let's say, 2017.
I mean, right. I did a whole analysis because basically, when people were complaining about the debuts, I did a whole analysis of when people make their debuts and whether this year has been different or whether it's been the same, and it's actually been very much aligned for what we've been doing for the last 12 years. I just need to try and find where the hell this spreadsheet is.
Because under Eddie Jones, England have had 101 new players.
Look, we had that Wales game in Washington where we basically sent over 23 debutants. So that will help a lot. Where's this? I even color-coded and everything.
I'd be interested to see how many. If it's more, I don't think it will be anywhere near that many, but.
Right, here it was. So since 2017, there have been, I can tell you.
I think Eddie Jones started around 2017.
Since 17, there have been 40 debutants for the Springboks.
Sorry, 2016. How many?
40 since 2017.
That's not a lot. Then again, we did have to kind of build a lot more.
Yeah, so look, the big one was 2018 where we had 18 debutants, of which 15 came in the mid-year series. I said that was that Wales test when we went over to Washington. We sent a whole different side. But it's been pretty. It's actually interesting if you look at the comparisons between like 2009 British and Irish Lions year compared to 2010. There goes my power. Thankfully, I've got a couple of charged lights, but I am currently in the dark. Oh, sure, but it means I can't pee at my pizza. Well, that's just ruined my night.
Unfortunate.
Why do I keep being called Jasper Visa? Like, look, I know with the moustache it's a bit more better, but people just keep calling me Jasper Visa, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, he's definitely a lot bigger. I mean, somebody said the other day that I looked like flipping. Who did they say I looked like? I got blank, but not happy with the comparisons.
Grant reckons that Jones screwed the Stormers, taking a step down to go and coach England.
Look, I mean, they've.
He did screw them. He did kind of.
No, look, it was wild. It was wild, and I would have loved to have seen what they would have done under him as well.
I was actually really keen for that as well. But I mean, I can't blame him considering the fact that he's been in England for what 4 or 5 years now, and he's just by far the highest paid coach in the world. So.
Yeah, look, man's earning sheets. Now, I see comments like this is the reason that this video has been done today. So when he says, no, the Boks haven't been building depth, how many debutants have they started this year? So 6 people have made their debuts this year. The last time there were 6 debuts in a Springbok calendar year was 2009, which
That's a while.
we can draw the similarities. 12 years ago, British and Irish Lions year. Now, in World Cup years, 2011 were 5 debutants, 2015 there were 4 debutants, and 2019 there were 4 debutants. So it's amazing how this all lines up. However, in non-World Cup years, you're usually averaging between 12 and 18 new players. And I think that biggest problem is that that's what we didn't have last year. And I think that if you look at like an Apele Fassi, the way he was playing for Sharks last year, I think that he would have had about 6 or 7 or 8 caps already by this time if we'd had that season last year. So I think it's such an interesting situation, because also now what do? Do you sit there saying, well, we didn't have last year, so we now have to do it now? Or do you kind of sit there saying, right, chaps, we didn't have last year, unfortunately, we're just going to have to push on with the current squad, and then if we lose the next World Cup, we're going to get sacked anyway. So it's the new coach's problem. He can go and start again.
That just shows this comes kind of, full circle to that comment I made about the Boks not being able to adapt to referees. South African side's not adapted to referees. If you can't adapt to something like that, it's not pleasant, but you kind of have to. Like, if you can't, you're just screwing yourself over in the end, because then you will have to. That means if you get 2 injuries in key positions, you're screwed. That's it, and you can't afford that. You don't want to get halfway through the World Cup in 2 years, have what happened to the All Blacks back in, I think, 2011, when they lost like 4 fly halves in 3 games, and it's like, okay, great, well, we're screwed. Fortunately, they had Stephen Donald, the GOAT. I mean, South Africa doesn't have that at the moment, because they're just not they're not picking anyone other than Pollard to start, apart from now, and it doesn't scream confidence in anyone other than they're tried and tested. It doesn't scream kind of we're building a greater squad around what we already have, which is fine, and that's probably what they should be doing, but they're not really doing that either. And so they could be heading for trouble, or they might win the World Cup. I mean, there's no fucking every prediction I make is bullshit anyway.
So I'm just having this comment, and it's actually just finished me.
And
the more I realize what he actually means, the more it's actually just like you just made my night, Grant. That's absolutely flipping horrendous. Dear. Terrible scenes. But
just leave.
Yeah, look, I think
let them take the old age home to the World Cup.
I mean, look, if the old age home, and the funny thing is that if we do, and we do the impossible and go back-to-back World Cups like New Zealand did, then you can't exactly. I mean, you can't. For as long as people keep winning, you can't question the process. You can only question the process when it all goes wrong. So it's always a fine line. But I think for me, the only players who I think would be really pushing it would be a Francois Steyn and a Jeff Mirren, because they'll be sitting at like 36, 37, or like 38 to the next World Cup. But as far as I'm concerned,
that's been shown that is not always an issue. I mean, you got players like Radiki Samo who would tear up New Zealand at 38. I mean, it's just like, well, I mean, it works. If it works, it works.
Yeah, well, I mean, Francois Steyn was probably like third or fourth oldest player on the pitch on Saturday and gets man of the match. I also think that these days players do play longer. I think gone are the days where you get to 32 and your legs are gone. I think you can play very comfortably at 33, 34 years old.
I mean, to be fair, Francois Steyn, playing wise, is probably about 28. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not upset. I'm not upset that he hung up the boots, because I did think that it was pushing it a little bit going into the next World Cup. But I think the biggest problem with the lack of depth at number 10 for the Boks is just the lack of options afterwards. I mean, right now, Pollard and Yankees get held up at customs on the weekend, because apparently that's happening to people, and they don't make it to England. Obviously, you don't actually have to go to the customs to get to England, but yes. Who is the next World Cup? I mean, who's the next fly half? And you've got
Steyn.
People are sitting, well, that's the thing. You're sitting there looking at Francois Steyn, or you're sitting there thinking, well, I mean, Damian Willems is injured though, and even then he doesn't play fly half week in, week out for his union. And if you look at our unions at the moment, Johan Goosen, well, guess what? He's out for another 9 months.
You might actually have to pull up like Cohen Bosch.
Well, that's the thing. Suddenly looking at Curran Bosch, and if you're not looking for Curran Bosch, suddenly you're looking at the youngsters. And if you're looking at the youngsters, even the young fly halves, it's not like we've got young fly halves who are like 24 years old. Our young fly halves are like Jordan Henderson, who's 20, like Cade Volata, who's like 20, Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu, who's like 21. We're talking about people who are like babies, fly halves. I mean, Chris Smith's like the only one which comes to mind, unless you start going into like your Eddie Fashears and like your Pumas and Cheetahs fly halves, who are actually sort of at test match age. You're thinking of at least sort of into your mid-20s. You don't really want to be playing test match rugby at 20 years old.
Fassi can play fly half. He can?
Dude, I've been told Fassi can play everywhere in the back line, 10 through to 15. So
I mean, I personally, I'd back him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean,
not at 12.
Maybe
not
you
at
could.
12.
Well, this is the thing. People are like, no, he covers centre as well. And I said, I can't remember too many games where he's played at 12 and 13, but each to their own. But I think flower half is a bit of an issue, and I think, to be fair to the Springbok coaching staff, I think it's kind of an issue that's out of their hands. I think they're sitting there saying, "Well, chaps, who do we go to? You're going to go to Chris Smith, who can't make the ball starting lineup, or we get Jan Goosen, while he's got a flip and he's got no knee. So unfortunately, I don't think there are a lot of options. I think in 4 years' time, there are a lot of options, because I do think that you've got a Hendricks Taylor, you've got a Volata, you've got a Mngomezulu, you've got even an old Butter Chamberlain starting to sort of come into his own, and he can play like he did for the last couple of games.
Radebe is coming back.
Who?
What's his name? Plays for the Sharks. Ini Radebe.
Oh, Ini Radebe is back in club rugby. Yeah, I saw that.
Apparently, he wants to kick off again. But I don't know if he's. I never see him playing for the Boks, but
no,
it'll be good for the Sharks. He's tiny.
I'd love him at the Lions, actually. But
is he playing for the Lions?
So no, I'm saying I'd love him at the Lions.
Right.
We need flower halves. We're currently in a flower half crisis. Even for you playing a flower half. Yes, but look, I think centre is probably in a position that we need to start looking at as Springboks. I think we just don't. I mean, we don't have an out and out centre other than. I mean, Jesse Creel we could probably consider an out and out centre. But we've only got 3 centers of the squad, in Akanya and Dame Delendi and Jesse Creel. I mean, Francois Steyn is a utility back. Damien Willems is a utility back, and those are our reserve inside centers. So,
Marcus Smith playing at 5 for 3 caps. At this point, just replying to Ruan, I mean, I love, the fact that Smith is going to be playing fly off. If he doesn't start against Australia, I'm just going to be like, well, we're going to lose this game. So yeah. if he does, it's just so pointless. And everyone's getting COVID, and it's just like, oh no. Marla's out through COVID. And instead of bringing up Mako, they're like, no, fuck you. We're going to bring up another debutant who's like 19 years old. It's great.
For the post, and they're saying, am I a joke to you? Like, come now.
But with the new with the new eligibility rules, I mean, you could see Billy and Mako turning up for Tonga in a couple of years' time.
But it just kills me that literally a couple of months ago, Michael's sitting there with the British and Irish Lions, and Eddie Joe's like, you know what, dude, just go and tell me, just go and prove once again. Like, listen, your spot's not guaranteed, eh? And they're just like, mate.
The thing is, I don't blame him though. I don't blame Eddie Jones for that, because Genge is really good. And so is Sinclair, and to be honest, they haven't had starting lineup positions for ages, and I think it's a good time to give them that. If Mako and Billy come back in, they probably will, because Eddie loves them. But you can see how quickly that happened with Jamie George, justified considering. But I don't know. I'm not sure. It depends how the new caps play, because they're bloody good. There are some bloody good new caps playing for England at the moment.
Yeah, look, and at the end of the day, you have to have Joe Marler in it, because any squad without Joe Marler is just not good enough. You have to have him at the end. I mean he's very much, if we're talking about like dream podcast guests, Joe Marler's up there along with like a Trevor Nyakane, flipping oxen chair, the way his Twitter's following is going. I only get him on the pod, but Joe Marler is definitely very high on the list of. Yeah, I know. We're trying to sort that out. Spoiler alert: we might be able to get the Ox on, hopefully in the new year. We've got some plans in the works, but
can ask him about the yellow card.
Yeah, Shame didn't have a great game. He just seemed to be just everything he did last week on the weekend was either a penalty, and then he got Shame. I felt sorry for his yellow card because it was literally like, yeah, what you actually did wasn't a yellow card, but like, yeah, you guys just too many. Cheers.
But like,
But
I saw an article on probably Facebook. I think I can't remember what publication it was, saying that South Africa are going to have to go and play 15 men against Scotland and the referee as well. What do you think about that?
yeah, I said this last night because SA Rugby magazine, they did their video preview, and the title was Springboks versus 16 men on Saturday.
Mm.
And we spoke about this last night. I personally am so bored of talking about referees and so bored of sort of just creating this whole narrative that every referee wants South Africa to lose and we're always playing against I'm just so bored of. I said to you last night, I was like, can we just move on? Like, we know we've had a couple of games where there were issues. We had the whole Fassi thing, like, and the problem is, I think, videos like that are just so harmful to the whole idea of it, because all it does is it comes across as sour. All it does is make it seem as if we're trying to make up excuses for why we're going to lose before we even take to the field. Like,
but the problem it also causes is if a call goes against you, no matter if it's the right call or not, they'll cry foul, and it's just like, well, no, who's actually refereeing? They're not going to get everything right. Refereeing is bloody hard, just as like a game is. But also, if you're, if you're doing things wrong, you deserve it anyway. There are cases where referees don't have a good game, but it's players don't have good games. You can't expect a ref to be on song all the time, and it's not an easy job.
And I said, and I've been saying for a while, and I think there have been some dangerous videos going around about refereeing analysis and stuff like that. And I think the problem, and some of these videos, and it's not only the same account, and obviously there is quite a prominent one, but there are some accounts also who they just don't even understand the rules, and they'll sit there saying, this should have been a 50-22. He's clearly in his own half, and you're sitting there saying yes, but it got carried back into your own half. Therefore, it's not a 50-22. So it becomes very problematic where you start putting out all this content about referees making wrong decisions when you yourself don't actually understand the law. Which is why 9 times out of 10, I just don't really comment on the referees. Like, if you think I've read the entire flipping rugby law book and memorized it, and every single time there's a law amendment, go and study it all up. No, I definitely don't. So, for example, like this weekend when they talked about not retreating 10, I hadn't even thought about the concept. The fact that they look at it now and they sit there saying, well, they reckon they probably did actually try to retreat. But I mean, that's not something that I was even beginning to think about initially. So I just think, as I said, I think it just creates this victim mentality that I just don't think we need it. It's just go out and win at the end of the day. If the referee makes a couple of bad decisions, he makes a couple of bad decisions. When TMOs make major mistakes, obviously that's a bit of an issue because you're sitting there saying, guys, you're watching this back.
Scotland. I don't know how Alatoa got a yellow card for that. Like, and that was insane. He barely touched the guy.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So I think when like TMOs and you've had the opportunity to look at it multiple times, get it wrong, cool, call them out. But like when people sit there like saying, you start drawing a line and you're sitting there saying he's clearly 30 centimeters onside. I'm like, chaps, the referee's calling this in the heat of the moment. All he's going to do is look up, see a player, sit there thinking he looks like he's offside. Therefore, I'm going to bowl. Like it's a split second decision. I think offside, forward pass to a certain degree, all those sort of very nitty gritty, even coming from the side and stuff like that. There's such fine margins. That those sort of calls I really don't get.
The ref can't go, oh shit, I was wrong. He might think it, but he can't say that.
Yeah, and he can't sit there saying, right, hang on, just pause. Can we just go check it out? Oh no, it was offside. Yeah, so it's and I do think even now that we do check far too much on. I mean, we sometimes on TMO sometimes we've had people going back like 6-7 phases to like 2 minutes ago to try and find an incident. You sit there going, chaps, we can't be doing this. If there's what I enjoy is when there's an incident and the referee says, can you check that now? And whilst play is going on, the TMO is going, right, cool, we'll have a check. And then when break of play, he says, right, break of play, have you checked? And he's like, yeah, we've checked, it's fine, carry on. I think we need more of that. And if you have to bring in a second TMO so one can do checks like that on the fly, then we could do that. But I don't like this whole spending 4 minutes going back to find an incident.
Is like what I don't mind that if it's like the referee during play has been like, right, we're gonna check that, we'll let play go on, but we're gonna check it, and then they go back. But if they go, oh, there's something else, oh, then go back, no, then go back, then back. It's just like, well, now you're just looking for something that's gone wrong.
Yeah,
you want something.
But we're going to start wrapping up here. So we'll wrap with some score predictions. So Henke Holmes said, what is your score predictions for Scotland? So everybody else put your predictions in the chat and stuff like that. Alpha Lincoln said he's going Boks 27, Scotland 18. Let's get your score predictions down in the comments. What are you thinking? Where are you going? I don't think that's actually a terrible one. You know, I think I'm hoping that we can see a game like that.
No, I think it'll be closer. I think it'll probably be a bit of a essentially another game like Wales for South Africa. I think it'll be maybe 18-15, just because Scotland doesn't like scoring tries against the better nations. And I reckon they'll score all penalties anyway. But yeah, something like 18-15.
Yeah, I hate giving actual scores. I prefer to say I reckon Boks by 5, and I think I said Boks by 6 last week. So I think it will. I think every game this year, this tour is going to be close. I mean, the Boks have been blown away once the entire year. You know, they just don't generally concede that many points. So I do think it'll be quite close
matches.
Yeah. So a couple of people. So got Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu going Boks 29, Scots 19, 29-30 from Louis in 1 point margin. Ruan reckons Scotland by 2, and he's going to blame Villiers when it happens. Simon Rantis going 35-21 to the Boks. Stephen this is a big one. He reckons 22-3 Springboks to win. Let's hope we see something like that. Grant Swartz reckons 24-12 to the Boks. Finn Russell will not have a big impact. Big call.
That is a big call considering what he did for the Lions.
Yeah, but Luanda says 29-30. I'm imagining we're just going to assume he's going for the Boks. But Carl, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you next week where we can build some hype towards England. And the redemption that everybody's calling from the World Cup final. I wonder. I'm trying to decide which fans are. I'm trying to decide who's more excited for the game or who's more worried about the game. You know, are England fans sitting there thinking we can put 2019 back to rest, or are they over it? Are we over it? What do you reckon?
I think the level of excitement over new players finally getting a game is far outweighing the kind of wanting to win the match. Obviously, we want to win, like it's rugby, but I think I'm much happier the fact that we've finally broken the shell and we're finally getting new players in. I'm very keen to see what people like Marcus Smith will do against South Africa. I'm keen to see Dombrandt maybe starting. I'm not a massive fan of Curry at 8, although I'd love Underhill. So how do you play both of them? I don't know. It depends. I know Courtney Laws will be playing because he was insane again, and that try-saving tackle was wild. But it'll be interesting. It depends on the squad that England puts forward. But I would certainly like to see them not really care so much about the score or winning the game, but really going with the more exciting players, and that could actually lead us to winning the game. So don't go back to what has not won you the match. Go to something new.
No, I agree. I back it. Well, hopefully in a week's time we'll have more to say on that, and we'll have the known team stuff like that. Apart from that, Carl, thank you very much for joining it. Everybody in the comments, thank you very much. We'll be live this weekend for all the major games, as many games as we can. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel as well. I think we officially passed 9,000 subscribers, which is very cool. So now we've got this last big 1,000 to try and hit 10K before the end of the year. That is the mission. So if you are watching, you haven't subscribed, make sure you do right now, and we'll see you guys all this weekend.
Yeah.